The Prime Minister's office has yet to comment on the phone call between Prime Minister Netanyahu and U.S. President Trump, in which the U.S. leader reportedly told Netanyahu that he must permanently end the war in Gaza and drew a line against Israel attacking Iran. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has more.
In what was described as a tense 40-minute discussion, U.S. President Donald Trump reportedly told Prime Minister Netanyahu that the so-called Witkoff framework that would pause the war in Gaza for 60 days in exchange for about half of the hostages held is not enough. Netanyahu has so far refused to negotiate a Gaza truce for hostage deal that would permanently end the fighting in Gaza, a red line for Netanyahu's right-wing coalition partners. Trump also reportedly ruled out an Israeli or a joint U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran at this time. Trump reportedly told the Israeli leader that his public comments on plans to attack Iran if nuclear talks fail were not helpful to his efforts to reach an agreement. Meanwhile, the top U.S. military commander in the Middle East, Mike Kurilla, said that he provided Trump and U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth with a wide range of options for preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear arms, should talks with Tehran fall through. He responded to this question in Congress, and his response.
President Trump's made it clear that if Iran doesn't permanently give up its nuclear enrichment, military force by the U.S. may be necessary. If the president directed, is CENTCOM prepared to respond with overwhelming force to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran?
I have provided the Secretary of Defense and the President a wide range of options.
I take that as a yes?
Yes.
There will reportedly be no discussion on a potential strike against Iran until and unless Trump determines that the nuclear talks with Iran have failed. Trump has not indicated that the U.S. would then give Israel a green light to act alone against Iran, or whether Washington would want a joint action or prefer to act alone.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now saying significant progress has been made in negotiations about a hostage and ceasefire deal. It's the second time in the last few weeks the Prime Minister signaled some type of advancement, but nothing concrete has happened yet. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian covers the hostage crisis for us and has the details.
As 55 hostages remain in the darkness in Gaza in Hamas captivity without providing any details, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now providing an update on the ongoing efforts to free the hostages in negotiations.
יש התקדמות משמעותית. אני חושב שמוקדם מדי לתת תקוות, אבל אנחנו פועלים ללא הרף בשעות האלה וכל הזמן. אני מקווה שנוכל להתקדם.
Within the last few days, Hamas submitted their response to U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff's proposal, with Witkoff calling them, quote, unacceptable. Reports indicate countries like Qatar are working to advance the deal and resolve issues for both sides, but especially to soften Hamas's stance on their response. Issues that stand in the way include Hamas wanting to end the war and stay armed, as Israel and Witkoff are pushing for a ceasefire that lasts for 60 days, although Israel is saying it won't agree to end the war completely. The Prime Minister's office said in a statement Netanyahu met with Defense Minister Israel Katz, IDF Chief Eyal Zamir, Strategic Affairs Minister Don Dermer, and other members of the negotiating team. The statement went on to say that Netanyahu is meeting with them to receive updates on the framework and for the release of the hostages and to discuss next steps. Intelligence work by special Israeli forces has resulted in the successful recovery operations of located and bringing home 3 bodies of hostages that were kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Oz on October 7th, which includes American hostages Judy Weinstein, Gadi Chagai, and a Thai hostage, Nenapong Pinta. Officials had hoped a breakthrough would happen around the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, which ended on Tuesday. Surprising comments from President Trump this week came to light when he said on Monday that Iran is involved in negotiations aimed at securing the release of the hostages. Now, 2 American hostages remain in Hamas captivity at this time, which are the bodies of Long Island native Omer Nutra and American-Israeli Itai Chen. The IDF says both of them were killed on October 7th and their bodies were dragged into Gaza by terrorists.
And joining us now in studio to discuss the latest events is Israel's Special Envoy for Trade and Innovation, Flor Hassan Nachum. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
So, Flor, we've heard these reports of a tense call between President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu. This is not the first time we feel tension here in recent weeks. How significant is this, do you think?
Well, you know, it's very difficult to know what to believe because, as you know, the press always likes to hype up these things because these are the things that get attention. And so, of course, America has its interests and Israel has its interests. But I think for the most part, America, at least we feel over here, and the government in general feels, that America has our back. They just put a veto on a very important UN decision last week. Let's not forget about that. There's already a lot of heavy weaponry in the region in case of the situation when we have to go in and dismantle the nuclear capabilities of Iran. So I think we have to take everything with a pinch of salt.
I'll keep with this subject. Trump reportedly demanded a permanent end to the war in Gaza and opposed an Israeli strike on Iran. How do you interpret this stance and how might it influence Israeli decision-making?
Well, I think that President Trump at the moment is trying to give a chance to these negotiations with Iran, whether you agree or disagree with him. I personally believe that they're not going to go anywhere because a scorpion will always remain a scorpion. You can't turn them into a dove. And that's Iran. And so I think that sooner or later the talks will fall apart because Iran has made it very clear that they want to enrich uranium. And President Trump has made it very clear that part of the deal is for them not to enrich uranium. So I don't see how this comes out in a good outcome. President Trump's got his own issues internally in America, economically, globally. And so you can understand why war is the last option. For Israel, war is never the first option. But we understand that we have a very, very cruel and very conniving enemy in the Islamic Republic of Iran that attacked us twice in the last year. And so we know who Iran is. Maybe President Trump will find out who Iran is and will give us the go-ahead eventually. And in terms of ending the war, nobody wants to continue the war. We want our hostages home and we want Hamas to be out of the picture so that we can all live a peaceful life. I don't think anybody disagrees on that.
Okay, so let's talk about the hostages. Netanyahu held a key meeting with security officials and ministers today regarding hostage talks. He says there's some kind of advancement. How close or still far do you think that we are from Israel, from a potential deal, Israel agreeing to a potential deal?
I really think it depends how much pressure America is putting on Qatar. Because as we know, Qatar is a very big player here in telling Hamas what to do because they fund them, they aid them, and they host them. And look at when they wanted to make a gesture to President Trump, how Idan Alexander, without any negotiations and without anything in return, was simply released.
That's right.
So I think the key here is getting America to pressurize its newfound friend Qatar in order to release all of the hostages in one go. I don't understand why we're still doing these stages. This has gone far enough. We need them all home. And I believe American pressure on Qatar can actually get that result.
And where Israel is concerned, with all this international pressure mounting, including from allies, do you see signs that Israel will soften its position with Hamas? And quite honestly, I personally don't understand how Israel is even in a position to be negotiating with a terrorist organization, but that's the case and it's happening. So do you think that Israel will stick firmly to their previous red lines, or will there be a softening of their stances?
I think that Israel understands that you can't leave even a little bit of Hamas because it will rearm, regroup, and we'll have the same threat on our borders in 3 to 5 years. In other words, if we don't deal with it now, our children and our children's children will have to deal with it. And I think that even the soldiers, even the ones that are exhausted, are saying and pressurizing, we've got to finish the job. And I believe that things are beginning to change. Why? The minute you take Hamas out of the humanitarian aid distribution, you have now taken them out of ruling people's lives and helping people or governing people. And that, to me, and the fact that these gangs are coming up, whether we like them or we don't like them, but the fact that there's a bit of an alternative of a leadership coming up in Gaza, this is a very important corner that we've turned. We need to see this through.
Absolutely. Flor Hassan Nachum, thank you. Please stay with us. We'll be back to you in a few moments for some more questions and more of your input. Thank you.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
And we officially launched our 24/7 network, including our new show called ILTV On the Hour, giving our viewers live updates on the top headlines happening in Israel and the Middle East, starting at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. You can find our live network on YouTube and soon in other streaming locations.
Day 614 of the war in Gaza. Over the past 24 hours, Operation Gideon's Chariots continued to roll throughout the Gaza Strip. At the same time, IDF anti-terror ops were active in the Nablus Kasbah in Samaria. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz reports.
In Gaza, during an operation by the Givati Brigade, the forces identified and eliminated 2 terrorists who were posing as women. They were carrying sacks from a military building used by the terrorists. In further activity, weapons were located, including rocket launchers. Targets attacked included terror tunnels, weapons depots, and other military infrastructure used by Hamas. Turning to Samaria, where a major anti-terror operation was conducted in Nablus. 2 gunmen were killed and 4 soldiers lightly wounded in the overnight maneuvers. The joint IDF, Shin Bet, and Border Police operation was conducted inside the crowded Nablus Kasbah. Security forces searched over 250 buildings and seized weapons from terrorists and wanted men. Additional operations in the Menashe area led to the arrests of 4 wanted men in Tulkarem.
A political drama is playing out today in the Knesset with the future of the Netanyahu-led coalition at risk. An ultimatum from ultra-Orthodox parties to dissolve the Knesset over the failure to pass a law on IDF conscription to their liking is at the center of the storm. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
The ultra-Orthodox parties are threatening to support a bill to disperse the Knesset due to Netanyahu's failure to push through a law to regulate Haredi army service. The bill represents the most serious threat to the coalition's stability since taking office at the end of 2022. As of now, it's clear that both Degel HaTorah and Agudat Yisrael, which run together as United Torah Judaism, are committed to supporting the bill. But the Aryeh Deri-led Shas party has yet to make a clear final decision and may be searching for a way to give Netanyahu more time. The ultra-Orthodox parties, together with the opposition, would have more than enough votes to topple the government. Without Shas, the coalition has a bare 61 majority in the 120-seat Knesset. Knesset plenum discussions are underway with the issue of the, quote, sharing the burden of army service playing out with political ramifications.
Netanyahu understood that he can give them everything all the time and they can maintain him in power. Now what we see is that we have come into a juncture where people in Israel are fighting a very, very nasty war in Gaza and in other fronts, in Lebanon, for example, and others. And the ultra-Orthodox who never serve in the army under the banner that they are studying the Torah and getting subsidies.
The legal team of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, headed by MK Yuli Edelstein, has been working on the text of a new draft bill, but agreement has remained unreachable. A law that is struck down in a preliminary vote may not be proposed again for 6 months, so the opposition will be careful to remove the bill from the agenda if it does not have enough votes. If the bill to dissolve the Knesset passes, it would still require 3 votes in the Knesset plenum.
If they will not go to the army, we are here to have a clash. The nature of the clash is unforeseen. It can be a violent clash, it can be an arrangement in the political realm, it can be something in between. But it's clear-cut that you cannot continue like that with such a large minority of the past becoming a governing majority and not participating in the country's major effort to protect itself and develop into the future.
For the first time since the start of the war, key Israeli cabinet members are facing personal sanctions from close Western allies. The UK, along with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Norway, have imposed asset freezes and travel bans on Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. The coordinated move is a response to what these countries describe as months of incitement and human rights abuses. In a rare diplomatic move, 5 Western nations, led by the United Kingdom, announced yesterday that they're sanctioning 2 of Israel's most far-right ministers, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. The joint decision includes asset freezes and travel bans, citing the ministers' roles in encouraging violence and human rights abuses against Palestinians in the West Bank.
Today, I'm talking about sanctions, I'm talking about asset freezes, I'm talking about travel bans of these 2 particular ministers, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who have been inciting violence against Palestinian people.
The sanctions come amid growing frustration among allies over the Netanyahu government's policies in the West Bank and Gaza. Both Ben-Gvir and Smotrich have long been lightning rods for international criticism. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar called the sanctions outrageous, emphasizing the government would meet early next week to formulate a formal response.
It is outrageous that elected representatives and members of the government are subjected to this kind of measures. I discussed it earlier today with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and we will hold a special government meeting early next week to decide on our response to this unacceptable decision.
Still, in their joint statement, the 5 countries sought to balance the move with reassurances, reaffirming their friendship with the Israeli people and continued commitment to Israel's security. And we now turn back to Flor Hassan Nahum here with us in studio. Flor, you're hearing this. What is your general reaction to all of this? How significant is this coordinated move by the UK and its allies against Israeli leaders?
Well, I think it's significant, but it's mainly performative because all of these countries have got a sizable Muslim population that are getting increasingly more radical and more Jew-hating. And to me, this is a way of them throwing them a piece of meat to continue business as usual on the one hand with Israel, but on the other hand, giving them something that they can be happy about. And of course, it's ridiculous. It's double standards of the worst kind, because essentially we have a government here of coalitions. And even if you agree with some ministers or you don't agree with some ministers, that's not what friends and allies do. We could get very angry about certain members of parliament in the UK, like Corbyn, who was terrible anti-Semite, terribly anti-Israel. Did we ever sanction Corbyn? No, because that's not what friends do. So is it significant? Yes, even though I believe it's mainly performative, it's significant because of the precedent sets. And it's actually kind of surprising because they should be putting their energy on cutting the incitement of the Palestinian educational system that they're paying for. So they're talking about these 2 ministers inciting hatred. They are paying for a curriculum of the incitement of hatred of Palestinian children against Israel and Jews.
Now, what do you think? What kind of diplomatic or political pressure does this actually place on Israel, and how might it affect its international standing?
Well, listen, I think it can't get worse than the ICC arrest warrants for Gallant and Netanyahu. I doubt that Smotrich or Ben-Gvir have foreign assets, and they're also not big travelers. So I'm not worried about them. This is, like I said, something that they wanted to do to appease the masses, the haters, instead of dealing with their own Muslim fundamentalist problems in their country. I actually feel sorry for them in the long run.
Now, these ministers, they're elected officials. Do sanctions against them blur the line here between trying to pressure a policy and actually interfering with a democracy?
Of course they're trying to interfere with a democracy, but we've seen this again and again, especially from left-wing governments around the world. We saw it with the Biden administration, when Chuck Schumer cuts up and says Bibi has to leave. Well, who are you? This is a democratic country, not a colony. And so, yes, there is interference. And God forbid Israel should ever. We're so careful to be bipartisan in the way we speak about foreign governments. I wish they would return the favor.
Gideon Sa'ar, our foreign minister here in Israel, he called the sanctions outrageous, unacceptable. What could be the next steps by the Israeli government in response? Is there something they can do?
It's very difficult to know what to do without escalating the situation into something much worse than it is. I really don't know what the advice will be to Gideon Sa'ar, but I think that Israel has a lot of intelligence cooperation with these countries, and Israel actually helps these countries with their security concerns. Maybe we shouldn't be so generous.
And the UK Foreign Minister, we just heard him speak, he also said that they still believe in a two-state solution. And while that's nice and dandy, that's not necessarily the reality here on the ground, is it?
Well, I think their pants have just been pulled down because they announced, along with Canada and France, that they were going to do this big summit to talk about the two-state solution. And in fact, Canada and France were going to announce a two-state solution, and they had to backpedal because they don't even know what a two-state solution looks like. Because you have a three-state solution. You have the government of Gaza, which was Hamas. You have the government of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, which is the PA. And nobody can get their act together to actually govern their own people instead of creating more terrorism. And so they can talk all they want, but ultimately, they don't even know what that looks like.
Not to mention that there hasn't been any democratic election in the Palestinian territories or in Gaza for many, many years.
They don't let facts bother them. You know, again, just see it as a performative action to calm their own fundamentalists in their country instead of dealing with them.
Flor Hassan Nahum, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now moving on to a leader who has shown up as a great friend of Israel. This morning, President of Argentina Javier Milei landed in Jerusalem, kicking off a pivotal visit marked by meetings with Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Herzog. The trip comes amid Milei's push to solidify Argentina's pro-Israel stance, address the ongoing hostage crisis, and reaffirm plans to relocate Argentina's embassy to Jerusalem. Argentine President Javier Milei touched down in Israel this morning, greeted with honor by Israeli dignitaries. His welcome included a momentous first handshake with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who called him a chaver, a true friend of Israel. In this meeting, Milei and Netanyahu committed to strengthening strategic ties. They discussed the future relocation of Argentina's embassy to Jerusalem, while focus also turned to the ongoing Gaza hostage crisis. Milei pledged Argentina's support to help free those still held by Hamas, including dual Israeli-Argentina nationals. The two leaders signed a memorandum of understanding to reaffirm their common battle against terrorism and anti-Semitism, further aligning Argentina with Israel on the world stage. He later met with President Isaac Herzog as well, receiving a Genesis Prize in recognition of his pivot towards Israel. Last night, Milei paid a heartfelt visit to the Western Wall, accompanied by his personal rabbi, a gesture underlining his admiration for Jewish tradition. By day's end, Milei will address the Knesset, cementing his pro-Israel credentials. If successful, announcements later this week may include embassy relocation plans and scheduled direct Buenos Aires-Tel Aviv flights, milestones in Argentina-Israel ties that echo across global diplomacy. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 22 degrees Celsius or 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see sunny skies alongside hot temperatures, seeing highs of 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching.